And away we go. It's just me at the moment. Not sure if Eric's going to join. Not sure if Risk is going to join. And I'm not sure if the third person is going to join. Either way, the show must go on. So, let's see what's in the news today for me to mostly rant about. UK signs $11 billion Eurofighter jet deal with Turkey. On Monday, British Prime Minister Keir Starmer arrived in Ankara and signed a deal for 20 Eurofighter Typhoon jets worth up to 8 billion something, advancing defense ties with Turkey. Turkey views the purchase as an interim step while its Khan fighter jet is developed and aims for a transitional fleet of 120 fighter jets, including 40 Eurofighters, 40 F-16s, and 40 F-35s. The deal preserves UK production lines at BAE Systems, with around 37% of Typhoon production at Wharton and Salisbury, supporting nearly 6,000 jobs plus regional employment. Starmer framed the sale as a boost to NATO security and the UK defence sector, calling it the largest fighter jet deal in almost 20 years that will pump billions of pounds into the British economy. UK spokespeople say that they have raised fair trial and rule of law concerns with Turkey at several levels after Turkish prosecutors filed new charges Friday accusing jailed Istanbul mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu of espionage. Wow, looks like the UK is actually taking its defense seriously. Now, this is not going to change how people view Keir Starmer in his leadership with the UK government. However, it is better to do something than nothing at all. And if doing something, at least do something that will secure the sovereignty of a country and secure its defenses from any outside forces. Not that it's ever needed at this time. Then again, if you look at the United States, they have many, many military bases in many countries around the world. And people ask, why is America such a big deal? Why do we care about what's going on in the United States? I'm just saying, there are many reasons, but you take your pick to what you think is the biggest reason of them all. What to know about uncontacted indigenous peoples and efforts to protect them. On Sunday, Survival International released a report identifying at least 196 uncontacted indigenous groups, with more than 95% residing in the Amazon rainforest. Experts note historical colonization and infrastructure caused uncontacted peoples to avoid outsiders after generations of violence, slavery, and disease, as loggers and ranchers brought gunmen and illness. Researchers found nearly 65% faced logging threats, about 40% mining, and around 20% agribusiness, while drug traffickers and illegal gold miners contaminate rivers and resources. Survival's research warned half of uncontacted groups could vanish within 10 years, and their loss would weaken global climate stability due to these communities' vital role. Survival International urges a global no-contact policy with legal recognition of indigenous territories, suspension of extractive projects, supply chain tracing, and remote mapping to protect uncontacted groups. I have a lot of opinions on this. Not that it should be of anyone's concern. However, it's important to consider different factors on both sides. On one hand, it is important that we shall leave indigenous and native populations to their societies and civilization, even when other societies are more advanced than them. On the other hand, there will come to a point where these indigenous or native tribes or people groups will eventually have to be contacted by people living in urban societies and civilization. I'd say just leave the natives and the indigenous people to whatever it is, how they live their lives, and then slowly over time, not all at once, but little by little, allow the indigenous people to be at least familiarized to some extent about our way of living. We're not going to force them to live our life. We're just going to we have to ensure that if we ever get in contact with indigenous people at some point, mainly by accident, it is important that there is an understanding with not just how the indigenous people live, but also as well as an understanding from indigenous people about how we live our lives. And from that point, we hope to find common middle ground from that. I think that's allowed to say. I think that's all there is to it. It's people, no matter how complicated people make this out to be, I'd say just let people live their lives how they want to live their lives. But of course, there will have to come there will come to a point of understanding about how we live our lives, and once we do understand how we live our lives and how they differ from one another, we hope to find middle ground. Surely and gradually, two strong quakes in the Atlantic Ocean rattled the Eastern Caribbean on October 27th, 2025. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake struck off Guadeloupe at 7:38 a.m. local time, centered at latitude 16.54 and longitude -59.49. Shallow depth under 30 kilometers meant the quake was classified as superficial, increasing risk of damage within a 100-kilometer radius in vulnerable areas. Shortly afterward, a second 6.0 magnitude quake struck the same area at a depth of 10 kilometers, USGS said, about 100 miles east of Guadeloupe. No tsunami warning was issued, and there were no intermediate reports of damage at the time of writing. Across the Eastern Caribbean, residents felt tremors from a 6.5 magnitude quake Monday, with a report timestamped October 27th, 2025 at 9:11 a.m. EDTA, urging readers to stay with Newsweek. Yeah, I'm not sure about that last part. Stay with Newsweek. I feel like I've discussed something like this before, that you shouldn't rely on one particular news source. You have you have to look at multiple perspectives, even if you don't agree with them. And you don't have to agree with multiple perspectives. However, it's important that you understand the different angles on how different stories are being reported. So back to the story about two quakes across the Atlantic Ocean. Well, firstly, glad there isn't much damage from what I just read, and most importantly, I'm glad that there haven't been any deaths coming from that. So I'm glad to see that wherever the people that live nearby Guadeloupe or other surrounding islands, they all get to live another day. Thank goodness for that. This is just one of few instances of natural disasters that is far beyond our control. Even if we try to manipulate or maneuver the earthquake to go the other way, it is still going to hit somewhere, and someone will be affected. The best we can do is prepare ourselves for the next time this happens, and hopefully no more damage, and hopefully the same can be said that no damage has been caused to infrastructure or any surrounding areas. Photos from US President Donald Trump's visit to Malaysia, South Korea, and Japan. US President Donald Trump is on an official visit to Tokyo, where he met with Japan's Emperor and the newly elected Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi. His trip to Asia is aimed at securing trade deals, investment, and increased defense spending. Trump, on his longest foreign trip since taking office in January, announced a series of deals with Southeast Asian countries and oversaw the signing of a ceasefire agreement between Thailand and Cambodia. during his first stop in Malaysia. His trip will end on Thursday with a summit with Chinese President Xi Jinping in South Korea, where the world's two largest economies will try to avoid escalating their trade war, Reuters reports. Well, Trump has already secured a $550 billion investment pledge from Japan in exchange for delaying the imposition of punitive import tariffs. Takaichi hopes to further impress Trump with promises to purchase US trucks, soybeans, and gas. I just left Malaysia, a wonderful and very dynamic country. We signed major trade agreements and rare earth agreements. And yesterday, most importantly, we signed the peace treaty between Thailand and Cambodia. No war. Millions of lives saved. I'm not sure about that, but at least it's something. Trump wrote in a post on Truth Social shortly before his departure. It is a great honor to have accomplished this. Now, off to Japan. Takaichi, who became Japan's first female prime minister, last week told Trump that strengthening the alliance between the two countries was her top priority in their first phone call on Saturday. Thousands of police have been deployed in the Japanese capital for Trump's arrival. The arrest of a man armed with a knife outside the US Embassy on Friday and a planned anti-Trump protest in the city's central Shinjuku district have added to the tension. Well, firstly, nice to see that Japan is doing pretty well for itself after electing their first female prime minister, and of course their continued relationship with the US, despite me arguing that countries are being too reliant on the United States and should do trade deals with other countries in case something with the US falls through. Nonetheless, nice to see countries are making amends and negotiating deals to ensure their strong relationship. You know what? It's good enough for me. Don't be too reliant, but it's good enough. And also, Thailand and Cambodia. Well, again, just like what I said with the peace treaty between Gaza and Israel, although it may look like some escalation between the two countries, Thailand and Cambodia may look like it's settled down, I would not jump to conclusions yet. We are yet to see if anything improves from that signing of that treaty. And also, same with Azerbaijan and Armenia a while back. It may look like the two countries are trying to fix and amend strained relations. They still don't like each other, and they have lots of historical clashes many decades ago. So don't always jump to conclusions. No, when you see two countries that do not like each other in the slightest, that sign a peace treaty saying, okay, we won't fight, we won't argue anymore. They may say that, however, you never know, particular circumstances would then reignite the fire between those two countries again. You can never be too sure, and you can never be too cautious either. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle share rare pics of kids at pumpkin patch. The Duchess of Sussex shared a rare glimpse of Archie and Lilibet in a video of them and the Duke of Sussex on an outing to a pumpkin farm. In a post on Instagram before Halloween, the family are seen strolling through rows of pumpkins with Archie, 6, running through a corn maze and Lilibet, 4, riding a wagon being pulled by Meghan, which is surrounded by California Dreamin' by the mamas and papas, and the papas also shows Harry carving a pumpkin and the couple holding hands. Harry is dressed casually in a hoodie and baseball cap in the clip, with Meghan wearing high-knee boots and a quilted jacket. In a caption to the clip, Meghan writes Happy Sunday with a pumpkin emoji and an orange heart. Only the backs of Archie and Lilibet can be seen in the clip, with the couple warning on World Mental Health Day of the impact of social media on young people. Harry, speaking at a Project Healthy Minds event in New York City, claimed that the digital world has fundamentally change how we experience reality. Earlier this month, Meghan also described how she and Harry had no plan when they first moved to California 5 years ago, except nesting and healing. I think 5 years ago was a very different situation for all of us. She said in Washington, D.C., for Fortune's Most Powerful Women Summit. And you know, Archie was so little, and I had just got pregnant with Lily around the same time. So we were nesting and healing. Firstly, what Harry said about fundamentally about the digital world. Well, I agree with him on that. And look, of course, people all have their opinions about what's going on with the royal family and Prince Harry keeping his distance from the royal family. If everyone's gonna have their takes, their thoughts, and that's okay. Everyone is entitled to their opinions, even if we disagree with them. Nonetheless, I agree with Harry on this. Like the digital world, like as a whole. In fact, social media and the internet, it really has an impact on how we experience life, right? And especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, that's an even bigger issue. Whilst people are praising its capabilities as far beyond human comprehension and abilities, being too reliant and compliant with AI will have dire consequences. How dire is anyone's guess to how open these people are of wanting to use AI in their day-to-day lives. I would warn these people that AI, as good as it is, will potentially make you a little less of a sharp tool in the shed than most people. I'll just put it lightly, like that. Nonetheless, nice to see the Duke and Duchess of Sussex just enjoying life, despite trying to heal from the situation they've been through many years ago. And yeah, you know what? I'm sick and tired of hearing the drama with the royal family. Like, I know people, they have strong opinions for the royal family, either positive or negative. However, you know, there are bigger issues in this world besides what people with a mass amount of wealth are going on with their lives. Like, there are people in wars risking their lives to ensure that we can live peacefully another day. Yeah, I can't. There's no other way of putting it. That is all that has to be said. Antarctic ice melt reshapes Southern Ocean carbon sink. On October 17th, Alfred Wegener Institute researchers published a Nature climate change study explaining why observational data show no decline in the Southern Ocean around Antarctic's CO2 sink. Climate models indicate that strengthening westerly winds circling Antarctica will push deep CO2-rich water upwards, reducing the Southern Ocean's long-term capacity to absorb human-made CO2. Long-term measurements show surface freshwater inputs have freshened water and reinforced density stratification, while the upper boundary of the deep water layer has moved roughly 40 meters closer to the surface since the 1990s. If stratification weakens, mixing could release stored deep ocean CO2 and trigger an ocean burp of heat, with warming greatest in the southern hemisphere. Researchers note that more winter data are needed to confirm deep ocean CO2 release, and in the coming years, AWI will study these processes through the Antarctica InSync program. So it's not looking good for Antarctica. And I was looking back about regarding the concerns about the ozone layer. And I've heard reports that the ozone layer is getting better, which is very good. I have to ask this question. How is it that there is so much research and lots of concerns regarding climate change is coming from the southern hemisphere and especially Antarctica? Yeah, there are also concerns in the northern hemisphere as well. However, I don't hear much about climate crises in the Northern Hemisphere as often as I do with the Southern Hemisphere, from my perspective. I wonder why that is. I'm just saying. I think there'll be more discussions like this in the next coming few years, and seeing that there's going to be more data research and analysis around Antarctica regarding the CO2 rich water and westerly winds pushing CO2 and the oceanic burp of heat, as they call it. Let's see how that goes. I know Risk will have his say on this, and yeah, that's that. Yeah, Risk does not is not convinced in the slightest regarding climate change. And you know what? I can't argue with that. I'll just leave it at that. Wall Street rallies toward more records as gold's price slumps again. U.S. stocks rallied on Monday with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.4% and the Nasdaq Composite up 1.3%, adding to their latest all-time highs set on Friday. The rally was driven by hopes that upcoming talks between US President Donald Trump and Chinese leader Xi Jinping could ease trade tensions between the world's two largest economies. Investors also expect the Federal Reserve to cut interest rates on Wednesday to boost the slowing job market, and for companies to continue delivering solid profit growth. Once again, how on earth are we having to look at the United States and China saying that they're such a big deal? They have to do something, because if they don't do anything, we're screwed. We're absolutely screwed. How have we come to that point? How are we letting the United States and China lead how the world progresses? That's not a good thing. And as it seems, I think, although I know Risk, if he was here, he would say that China is depleting, it's slowing down, it's on a decline. The factories are empty, he would say. That's not going to stop China from being a dominant powerhouse in the next few decades, just like the United States was in the last few decades. And at some point, right now, for whatever its peak is at left, we shall see what will happen next regarding gold prices and US, China, trade talks, etc. Something will have to be done, and it has to be good. Once that's done, and once that is done, please, other countries around the world, to the best of your ability, produce your own goods and services, and do not be reliant on the United States. You can still show trade talks, and you can show great gestures of diplomatic relations with the US and China. However, never be reliant on big powerhouses, because at some point, their dominance aren't going to last for long. It won't last forever. There will be a change of a new era, and you have to be prepared for that. Everyone's got to be prepared, whether people like it or not. As the Atlantic Ocean warms, climate change is fueling Hurricane Melissa's ferocity. On Tuesday, Hurricane Melissa is forecast to make landfall in Jamaica as a Category 5 storm with sustained winds over 157 miles per hour. Climate scientists said Monday the warming of the oceans helped double Hurricane Melissa's wind speed in less than 24 hours, fueled by surface temperatures around 30 degrees Celsius and warm deeper layers. Residents in the northern Caribbean faced immediate storm impacts, as at least 6 people have died and nearly 200 homes were damaged in the Dominican Republic, while the U.S. National Hurricane Center warned of up to 40 inches of rain in Jamaica. Policymakers say the storm heightens the need to invest in early warning systems and coastal defenses, emphasizing the urgency for decisive climate action to avoid exceeding 1.5 degrees Celsius warming. Scientists said this is the fourth storm this year to rapidly intensify in the Atlantic, while a 2023 study found such hurricanes are now more than twice as likely to do so. Firstly, I feel so sorry for the people, either in Dominican Republic or in Jamaica, having to go through these storms and see their homes being damaged, and of course, lives in those two countries have been lost. Rest in peace to those people whose lives were lost during those storms. I send my condolences to the friends and families of those who have lost their lives to the storms so far this year. And secondly, regarding investment in early warning systems, although I forgot what it was called exactly, what the United States federal equivalent for weather tracking data, when it was announced that funding was going to be pulled out from weather data tracking systems, or at least closing down the department that does such tracking of weather data. Now, not to say I agree with pulling the department of weather tracking or drawing out, taking away funds from weather tracking data tracking. However, I have warned multiple times that there will come to a point, will has to come to a point that at a state level, there has to be a state level weather tracking data centers for them to look at how storms would progress and what the trajectory of these storms would be in the event that the federal level weather tracking system eventually fails or will potentially no longer exist. I think it may no longer exist. Nonetheless, it is so unfortunate that not just the storms that are coming into the United States, yet there is so little weather tracking for these storms, particularly at state level. For years, I would assume for years that they would relied on weather tracking data at a federal level for many years for when it had been around. And now Donald Trump has announced that he will take funding away from federal level weather tracking data of storms and other weather conditions. It is now down to the states to do so on the. Of course, I don't agree with taking away funds for weather tracking data. However, I still urge that, and of course warn that if that was to happen, which most likely it has, the states themselves will have to provide their own systems of tracking weather data and storms and other weather conditions. Nice, it's glad to see, knowing that there is a need to invest in early warning systems and coastal defenses, at least at a state level. But if not, then what are you doing? What are these people doing if they don't know when the storms are going to hit their shorelines? It's ridiculous. It's an outrage. Rally held in Alberta, education ministers riding amid recall petition. The Alberta government is set to table legislation today ordering thousands of striking teachers back to work and end their week-long strike. Premier Danielle Smith has said the strike, which began October 6th, has gone on far too long and that it's harming children. She has said, barring an 11th hour deal, her government would table back to work legislation Monday to force an end to the job action and return kids to class. Both sides have been deadlocked over wages and classroom conditions, with the province's latest offer including a 12% wage hike over 4 years and a promise to hire 3,000 more teachers. The Bank of Canada is widely expected to cut its benchmark interest rate again this week, even though recent inflation and jobs data might make the case for a hold. The central bank cut its policy rate by a quarter point to 2.5% in late September, snapping a streak of 3 consecutive holds. Since then, Statistics Canada has reported a surprise gain of 60,000 jobs and a jump in the annual inflation figures for September. Wednesday's interest rate decision will be the Bank of Canada's second last of the year, and comes less than a week before the federal government tables its fall budget. I can't say I blame them. Usually I don't have much to say, but when I do, of course, children are our future. Nonetheless, whilst teachers are important in preparing the young for what is yet to come, for their futures, there has to be something. Someone has to look into this about not just the reason why the teachers are striking, because, well, most of the time when teachers strike, I think 90% of the time we're pretty sure what the main reason would be, as what I just read there. We also have to ask ourselves, whatever deal is being negotiated for teachers in Alberta, will that be enough for the next 5 years minimum? 5 years. I know it said a price hike in the next for the next 4 years, but I would say 5 years minimum. Will this offer for pay rise for teachers be enough for the next 5 years? Because if it's not, then the teachers in the not so distant future will go out and strike again. And I am not to say that we can't, and I am not saying we should always increase pay for particular jobs every time they strike. We can't just rely on minimum wage pay.